Hello, audience. My name is Dalton Mortimer, and I am the Authenticator. And welcome back to A Mystic's Vlogs, a show where we take a relatively serious look at media with a explicit supernatural or fantastical element through a magical, mystical, mythological, folkloric, paranormal, or occultic lens. And this time, it's Legends of Tomorrow, Season 4, Episode 2, The Witch Hunt. And my god, sometimes I hate being right. Because, of course, if you'll recall last week's coverage of Legends of Tomorrow, you will remember that at the end I gave my speculations that they were going to waste one of the greatest magical happenings in American history on a skirmish with a fairy godmother. And, well, yep. Let's get into it. I have no patience for this shit. I have a strong suspicion I'm gonna have to burn this down. But in we go anyway. We open, and I shit you not, already we have something that makes me worried this is gonna be a little bit sketchier than I would prefer. In the form of Ray trying desperately to wire the bones of Constantine's minor saint, which he had previously enchanted, into the temporal seismographs. Now, if you'll recall the previous episode, you'll recall that I kind of had an issue with Constantine having enchanted these bones anyway because they're sanctified, which puts them more in the realm of religion than magic in general, and would endanger their mystic resonance to begin with. And now, these bones are being wired into a temporal seismograph. So, we have a heady mix of magic, religion, and science in this case. Kill me now. Now, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt so that my head does not explode, and say that possibly Ray learned a few things while dealing with magical entities in the previous season, and thus knows well enough to know not to expose mystical elements to electromagnetic radiation, thereby disenchanting them. And a seismograph is analog enough that I can make the argument that he just replaced the pins of the seismograph with the bones, finagled in a couple of the analog elements, and left all of the electronic elements in the back where it can connect to the computer and can be analyzed therein. I really hope so. And let's not even get into the magical energy shouldn't even be able to be converted into digital energy thing, because this episode contains so much bollocks to begin with, and I'm moving on. I'm moving on for the sake of my own sanity, and fuck you. We're only one scene in, and I've already eaten up about 4 minutes of this review. And I'd like to keep these within the 15 minutes, 20 minute range, if it's all the same to all of you. So, moving on. Fortunately, for the sake of my ability to remain composed, Johnny Boy shows up in a slightly worse attitude even than normal because, of course, he's been lit in a fire under by his pursuing demon, which I really do still hope is Nergal, and fortunately, he's the one, for the moment, that appears to be talking sense, when the seismograph dings and we find ourselves having to deal with mystical happenings in Salem, Massachusetts. And of course, Johnny, being a mystic in his own right, points out the fact that no mystic would be there in the 1600s. It's of course ironic that later on in its history, Salem has now become a mecca for things New Agey, witchcraft, occult, and magical, but that's, I wonder if that burns up the souls of any of the puritanical douchebags what did the witch trials in the first place. You went and mostly got a bunch of not witches hung for being witches, and as a result, you got a bunch of actual witches and magic users to encroach on this area and basically make it the magical mecca. Oops. Lol. But anyway, sidebar over. And I will say this for Johnny Boy, he may potentially actually be a little bit wrong about that. Because for all their faults, in this particular case, the zealotous puritanical witch hunters might have debatably gotten something analogous to one they were looking for, in the form of Tituba, who, being as she was from Africa and was a slave, probably practiced some form of minor shamanism with mystical elements in something similar to a proto voodoo sort of thing. So, hey, 1 out of 19 is still abysmal, but it's a hell of a lot better than most witch hunting ever did, considering that according to most accounts of the witch trials that we have, one of the things that started them was Tituba playing some kind of divination game with the Paris children, Paris, of course, being the main minister in Salem at the time. So, maybe Johnny is wrong, and by extension I was just wrong when I praised him for talking sense. But let's not give the writers of Legends of Tomorrow all that much credit, because of course they didn't use any of the things I just said, so bollocks to them. I bulletproofed you slightly, and now I have no qualms with knocking you right the fuck over. Let's not give the puritanical douchebag witchfinders any particular credit either, considering that, as I mentioned previously in my first Castlevania video, they are using a completely different definition of the word witch than the one that actually would reasonably apply to Tituba in this case, so even my minor bulletproofing just kind of falls flat, considering that their definition would have been someone that we in the actual community would have called on the left-hand path, i.e. someone who bartered regularly with lower beings, i.e. demons, jinn, etc., and in this case signed their soul over to one. So, yeah, bollocks all the way around. Bollocks, 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 and more bollocks. And speaking of the continuation of bollocks, can I just say how ironic and hilarious it is that the Legends of Tomorrow writers predictably go on and fucking on via the characters about how bad the Puritanism of 1692 was, considering how deep in the social justice paint Legends of Tomorrow tends to be most of the time. It doesn't help you to call out one kind of Puritanism if you're just going to go on and engage in another kind of Puritanism, you stupid fucks. You're not making yourself look good, you're making yourself look partisan and hacky. Not that I am defending the Puritans of 1692 by any stretch of the imagination, considering I am bisexual, a occultist, in this case, about as close to a proper witch as they would even be able to conjure, and also disabled. So, yeah, I'm burnt or hung or murdered about 3 ways from Sunday by those kind of Puritans, but consistency of principles is a bitch, and I was also a philosophy major, so yeah, I call you on that bullshit as well. Anyway, the plot, such as it is, begins in earnest when the legends see a group of Puritans escort an accused witch away, and then are promptly Hitchcocked the fuck out of by a murder of crows. And it leads through a series of scenes a little bit too long for my liking, so I'll skip over, to a fairy godmother. And immediately, we ram right straight into the wall, once again, of this premise. Namely, that a Puritan child of 1692 would probably not look too favorably on a fairy any more than she would a demon, considering the church's byline of the current day and age was that fairies were either druids who had been depowered upon the conversion of the British Isles to Christianity, minor demons or falling angels that had stuck to the earth rather than made it all the way to hell, or pagan gods who had been disempowered by the Christian or monotheistic one. None of these perspectives, mind you, would have been either absent from the mind of a child in Puritan Salem, or would have been easily looked over. So, yeah, you went and forgot how Puritan in a show about Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Also, you could introduce to one of the great witch trials, mind you, a fairy godmother. I despair. I despair for writing, I despair for humanity, and I despair for my lack of ability to give further fucks. And yes, I'm well aware that later on in the very same episode, Prudence, the little girl that the fairy godmother has apparently attached herself in a symbiotic relationship to, which, by the way, is a bit of lore fabricated entirely from whole cloth, considering that fairy godmothers were just fairies who happened to also be godmothers as favors to humans, rather than a race or subcategory of fairy in their own right. So, bollocks, yet again. Yeah, I'm aware that Prudence says that she thinks the fairy godmother has been sent by God, but that just shows that the writers did no research as to what Puritans actually thought about fairies. Now, they were wrong, because of course fairies are nature spirits, predominantly, but still, if you're going to cover Puritans from a semi-historical perspective, you might want to look into Puritan perspectives from a historical context. Just saying. Anyway, fortunately, the fairy godmother starts singing, and it's mostly so the legends, mostly Sarah and Nick can make a bunch of cynical Disney jokes, but I actually liked this bit, considering that it may potentially be one of the few mystically accurate things that happens in this entire goddamn episode, considering that the word ionkos in Greek, the Greek word for incantation, is also the Greek word for song. And oftentimes, vibrational frequencies can be used for higher magics. And in this case, it might be the means by which the godmother does her web-weaving spells. Web-weaving being a term for complex magic done by essentially producing long, convoluted, large, expansive matrices of mystical energy. And if they're going to give her quasi-reality warping powers, they might as well rationally justify it, magically speaking. Although Johnny does say that a large portion of her powers does come from the host that she is bonded to, hence the need for the bond in the first place. And right here I have to ding them on a creative level for missing an opportunity. Because if I were writing this, the way I would do it, in the event that I had that as a feature, would be each time the godmother uses magic, have Prudence get slightly weaker, and then have Johnny, an experienced mystic, teach Prudence proper magic so that she no longer needs the focal point of the fairy godmother to utilize it. Thus, it would give her a character arc, him a character arc, make the fairy godmother malevolent enough to actually justify sending her to hell, which yes, he sends her to hell again. Johnny boy, get a different spell, man. Research the other world. If you're going to be dealing with fairy creatures, then send them home to the other world, the fairy realm. For fuck's sake, man. And not to toot my own horn for too long here, but if they did it my way, it would provide an interesting twist on the whole witch trials thing, considering that the birth of a practicing witch in Salem would be considered a positive thing. thus sticking it to the Puritans, like the writers justifiably want to, making the witch hunt analogy kind of sensible, and actually making the fairy godmother serve a purpose in the larger flow of the witch trial incident. But I digress. I don't know. I suspect this would have been a better option, but what the fuck do I know? Anyway, that's all I have to say about the main plot for the time being, so let's cover the two subplots now. Namely, the subplot of Zari being a stupid dipshit and actively using her powers to try and save the little girl's mother from the from the gallows, which they do actually get that right. Witches in Salem were not burnt, they were hung. Burning was something that happened primarily in Europe. And, of course, the second subplot, which I'm going to have quite a lot more to say about, namely, apparently, in the DC universe, mind you, they have to justifiably prove that magic exists. In the DC universe. Because, of course, the Time Bureau is about to get its funding cut, and what? The Time Bureau has never had any mystics on its payroll? Ever? In the DC universe? Jesus Christ, this is the bat atheism thing all over again. And I'm going to have to replicate a similar rant I did when that happened. So, here we go. In our universe, atheism, agnosticism, and debatably anti-theism are reasonably sensible positions because the metaphysical is separated from the mundane in several key aspects, is subtle, and there are various different evidence thresholds for various different people. So it is entirely reasonable that people in our universe do not hold spiritual beliefs, primarily because of the narrativistic aspects of religion that are fundamentally irrational in most places, the rarity of the study of magic, and also the subtlety of the metaphysical as a general rule. Now, this does not apply in the DC multiverse, though, because gods definitively exist. Several of them walk down the street, i.e. Wonder Woman on a regular basis, Shazam, so on, and so on, and so on. You are telling me that in the DC multiverse, people in wealthy government positions, I can give the mundane people a certain amount of credit because cognitive dissonance can do amazing things to the general populace. So fine. And also, the government does a good job of keeping those types of things secret as a general rule anyway. But in high government positions, where time travel is a regular occurrence, and mind you, Gideon has magical symbols in her databases on file, as seen in last season's episode, Daddy Darkest. You are telling me that in such a universe, they still cannot comprehend that magic fundamentally exists, along with most religions. Are you fucking kidding me? For real. Rant over. So now that triple threat of sheer wrong that offends me in 3 different ways, as an occultist, as a nerd, and as a philosophy major, is out of the way, back to criticizing the specific stupidity of this episode of Legend of Tomorrow. Namely, you have John Bloody Constantine on your payroll in this instance, and you need someone to demonstrate to a bunch of suits that magic fundamentally exists. Allow me to gobsmack you upside the head and insist that you remember your resources here. John Constantine, mind you. John fucking Constantine, and you can't think, maybe we should pull Johnny away for just a second so that he can come and save our asses in this boardroom meeting. Again. No, instead, we have to have the inevitable father-son bullshit between Nate and his father, who's apparently a sitting member of the chair on the Time Bureau, and has not known for this entire time that Nate works for the Legends? Like, do these decisions not come on his desk at some point? That's just a basic logic question, mind you. That's not anything relevant to what we're talking about, but fuck me running, that's stupid. Anyway, let's move on to Zari's special brand of stupidity, shall we? I've given the Legends atheism apparent thing enough rage for one day. And yeah, let's move on before my head explodes by a stress-induced brain aneurysm, shall we? Zari, in service mostly to her own character motivations, decides that she is going to take it upon herself to save this one from the witch trials, timeline be damned. Granted, over in the main plot, they've already kind of damned the timeline by exposing the young Puritan girl to modern amenities and such and so forth. So, yeah, the timeline's fucked anyway. But Zari attends a trial meeting for the witch trials, and upon finding the actually historically accurate practice of poking the accused with a blunt end of a needle so that their quote-unquote witches' marks, which can be anything from a scab to a branding accident to just about any blemish on the skin, will not bleed, as was the actual practice employed by most puritanical witch hunters. Rather than subtly making the judge drop the needle, though, and pointing out, "Oh, yon needle has been blunted somehow. We should poke it with the proper end if this is truly the goal we have," and play acting as a Puritan for a bit, she decides to basically make a bloody, dark, magical spectacle of it by choking him to death almost with wind power. Okay? Naturally, as a result of this display of powers that are actually properly magic-based, the court gets whipped up into a even worse frenzy and decides, fuck it, hanging isn't worthy of these witches are too powerful, we need to actually follow the lead of our old world brothers and sisters and burn them. So well done, Zari. You took one of the worst chapters in American history and one of the worst cases in the witch trials hysteria, and you went and made it worse. Wah, wah, wah. Meanwhile, back in the A-plot, Johnny and the rest of the gang are completely failing to keep this kid happy, causing its godmother to show up. Said godmother then goes on a rampage because this kid is now pissed off, thinking that no one is going to save mother like that she was promised they would. Johnny loses his mouth, which is especially ironic considering that earlier he said something remarkably stupid about spells being only verbal. Johnny, you're a dumbass sometimes. And people are turned into pigs, so I guess we're never getting Cersei because that was a complete waste of out of my way, you swine, as a joke. And she tries to save people from being burnt, almost burns a guy alive, is saved by the power of pep talks, severs her connection to the godmother, said godmother is sent to hell, but not before Johnny tries to bargain with her to become her quote-unquote new host, because he needs more power, presumably to fight his upcoming demon, who I still hope is Nergal. And the episode roughly ends. Not before the godmother reveals she knows who Johnny is, which I find hilarious, and tells him to piss off because with all her powers and all the powers she would have given his connection to magic already, she still can't do shit to help him. So fuck off, Johnny. Clean up your own mess for once. Is generally the attitude that is taken, and the episode ends. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of my review of Legends of Tomorrow, Season 4, Episode 2, The Witch Hunt. My God, in every kind of dimension, this is stupid. For real. This one really kind of fucked with me a little bit. I don't remember a single fucking thing about the preview for next time, and apart from Johnny's bartering with the fairy godmother, there really were no Easter eggs for next time, and nothing for me to speculate over. So, yeah, this one was a doozy. Fuck this episode. Fuck it in every orifice. I guess there's nothing left for me to do but say I will see you all at the next Mystic Conjunction. Cheers, everyone, and I will see you all next time.